Hello, we will be covering Hinduism Chapter 4 in this video lecture. Hinduism is the world's third largest religion. There are approximately 920 million Hindus, or 13.5% of the world's population, making Hinduism the third largest religion after Christianity and Islam. However, most of us can't really say we know a lot of Hindus because almost 900 million of them live in India. And here is a map. Here's India, and Middle East is over here. Then we get into China. And now here's an interesting thing. Look at how big China is. It's huge. And then India is much smaller. And keeping in mind that they have both of them over a billion people living there. So you can imagine the overcrowding. It is a conglomeration of diverse traditions and beliefs. Hinduism does not have a single founder, as we see with Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Zoroastrianism. So that has instead, what we see is a religion that has emerged from an earlier animistic religion and then has just been perpetuated through the last 4,000 years. It has no central doctrinal authority, and many practicing Hindus do not claim to belong to any particular denomination or sect. Hinduism is the world's oldest major religion that is still widely practiced today. The word Hindu comes from the Sanskrit name for the river Indus. So, in the same way that we saw with Mesopotamia, we had the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. With Egypt, you had the Nile River. Well, in India, you had the Indus River, which is where civilization emerged. Before Hinduism, there was a society called the Vedic civilization of ancient India, and they emerged around 2500 BCE, and they were pretty stable until about 500 BCE. Archaeology has shown that by 2500 BCE, there was a very large advanced civilization in India, again along the Indus Valley. Archaeologists have found many examples of writing from this era, but they have yet to be able to translate it. And again, if you're an archaeologist working in India, this is going to be one of those things that is a very popular topic to study. Beginning around 2000 BCE, a group of migrants from Persia moved to the Indus Valley, and they were called Aryans, which in Sanskrit means noble ones. And remember, when we went over Zoroastrianism, we were also looking at how the Aryans in the Persia area eventually moved towards Zoroastrianism. The Aryans who stayed in Persia, like I said, founded Zoroastrianism. And just as a side note, and I think this is just interesting, modern Persians use the term Aryan to rename the country Iran, which means land of Aryans. So pre-Hinduism, we had the Indo-Aryan religion, which was polytheistic and animistic, and they made a lot of sacrifices to the gods, built on altars. They did not build temples because these people were still largely nomadic. So you'll see Indo-Aryan polytheism gives way to Zoroastrianism in Iran, and then Vedic India, and then eventually to Hinduism. The sacred book of Hindu are called Vedas, which hold the basic source of Hindu understanding in the world. They were originally developed around 2000 BCE as part of an Aryan oral tradition. And then eventually they were written down around 1500 BCE. So, as we have talked about the various religions like Judaism and Christianity, a lot of these things were oral stories that were carried from family to family, generation to generation, until someone actually wrote it down and created a holy book. So again, keeping in mind that, for example, the New Testament with the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were not written until 40 or 50 years after Jesus died. The most commonly discussed god in the Vedas is Indra, the god of the thunderbolt or clouds, rain, and the ruler of heaven. He conquers Vrtra, the personification of chaos. So this will tell you a lot about Indian society. The balance between order and chaos being very important. The Vedas also recount the flood story. Manu is a man who is washing his hands in the river one day, and a fish swims into his hand and convinces him to protect him from predators, and he will save him one day. He keeps the fish in a jar, and when he outgrows it, he digs him a pond. And when he gets too big for the pond, Manu takes him to the sea, where he is now larger than any of the other predators. The fish tells him of a great flood and urges him to build a ship. When the flood begins, the fish swims to Manu in his ship and has Manu tie the ship to the fish's horn and takes him to the top of the mountain, where Manu ties the ship to the tallest tree and waits for the waters to recede. Manu is the sole human survivor. So, we see a lot of overlaps with the story of Noah, but he's the only one. He doesn't have a woman with him, he doesn't have any animals, but trust me, the Hindus have got this covered. Because they also tell the story of the first woman. So Manu wants children, so he commits to sacrificing a meal to the waters. After a year, a woman, Kshatrapa, is created from the ingredients of the meal. They make more sacrifices, and that allows them to have children who eventually repopulate the earth. So again, a lot of these things, to kind of go back to the very beginning of class, are how we explain the things we don't understand. So again, that transition from magic to religion to science. And as we begin to understand things in a more scientific vein, it doesn't minimize our sense of religion or our sense of faith. Rather, it allows us to see that there are certain things that early man needed to be able to explain to himself or herself. And these stories represent them. It's not meant to debunk religion in any way. Then we have a section of the Vedas called the Upanishads, and they speak of the supreme soul of the universe, Brahman, who is eternal, infinite, unknowable, sexless, without a past, present, or future. In this section of the Vedas, it talks about mankind's true problem being ignorance, and only when they seek true knowledge will they be able to find release from their problems. To expand on this concept, man lives in a world of illusion and ignorance, and when they seek out their true nature, they will find the divine inside of themselves and will live on a new plane of existence. So, we're not looking at a particular set of do's and don'ts. Rather, it is a desire to understand oneself, in the world, to understand the world. So Hinduism is a very passionate religion in the sense that we want to be able to look around us and understand without being deluded by society. Another major tenet is the idea of karma, and this is a very popular idea in the West too, that every action or thought has a consequence and can impact one's current life or succeeding life. An evil person, in other words, is acting out of the consequences of choices he has made in the past. Here's one of my favorite cartoons, guy doing a little domino thing, and you're going to notice the concept of karma because eventually that last giant pillar is going to land on him. The Hindu afterlife is much different than what we saw with the Abrahamic religions, where eventually you go to heaven or hell or purgatory or the void. Hindus don't truly believe in an afterlife. They believe that when a person dies, their life force does not die with the physical body. The life force moves to another time and body. This is called samsara. In the West, we call this reincarnation. Indians saw samsara as a curse because one is bound to live in ignorance and pain in countless lifetimes. The goal is to break the cycle of karma and samsara and to be free of the burden of life. This is called moksha. Release only comes when there is true knowledge of the illusion of life. There were four socioeconomic classes of Aryans and later the Hindus. There were the Brahmins, the priests who served the Aryan cults, Kshatriyas, the chieftains and their warriors, Vaishyas, the commoners and merchants, and the Shudras. They are the conquered people who were not considered full members of society, often living as slaves or servants to the Aryans. This is going to be really important because of all the things that carry through history, this is one of the most prevalent you see in Indian society. To this day, despite it being officially disbanded and illegal, these social classes are still respected and kept very significant to people in India. Then we have the law of Manu. People were expected to perform their duties faithfully and move through each class from one incarnation to the next. So in this lifetime, you might be a Shudra, and in the next lifetime, you'll go up one step. And the idea here is that if you act according to what's best for society and what's best for other people, you will move up that reincarnation ladder, that karmic ladder, until eventually you're born into a Brahmin family. Mobility through these classes could only be achieved through reincarnation. Now, when we look at women and Hinduism, ancient women had a very limited role in this society. They belong first to their fathers, then to their husband, and then when their husbands die, they belong to their sons. And they should not seek independence. There are some very, very conservative parts of India where this is still practiced. And you will oftentimes see women who are beaten out in public just because this is such a norm in this part, these very conservative parts of India. So Hinduism eventually gives birth to two new religions. In the 6th century BCE, two new religions emerged from Hinduism, offering alternative ways to worship, both rejecting the idea of interacting with the gods via sacrifices, and instead focusing on the accomplishments one makes in their lives. The first one is Jainism, and this taught that release is found through asceticism, which is the denial of bodily pleasures. So you eat just enough to stay alive. You don't sit on a cushion. Instead, you sit on the hard ground. You walk shoeless. All kinds of bodily deprivations. This religion still is going around today, and there are still about 2 million people who follow it. Now, interestingly, you'll see here's a representation of the Jainist sign. You'll see the swastika, and essentially what Hitler was trying to do was co-opt an Aryan symbol. But ironically, this is all about peace and doing the right thing and moving through each level of incarnation to achieve the ultimate joining with God. And, obviously Hitler kind of made it his own. Buddhism taught that release could be obtained through moderation, otherwise known as the middle path. And we'll talk about this in a lot more detail when we get to Buddhism. next week. There are approximately 375 million Buddhists in the world today, and that is a obviously considerable number compared to 2 million. So clearly, a path of moderation is much more appealing than a path of asceticism and self denial. Around the beginning of the Common Era, so around the time when Jesus is born, Hindus begin to change, especially with respect to their polytheistic worship. The existence of many gods were still acknowledged, but Hinduism started to focus on a few major gods and their wives. There's Brahma, the creator. In art, he is shown as wearing red with four bearded faces and four arms. So you see the red cloak, the four faces, four arms. Then we have Shiva. Shiva is the destroyer. He is the god of death, destruction, disease, and dance. So you often see him represented doing a dance move. He is also the god of reproduction, animal, vegetable, and human. Now, this isn't as odd as it may seem, death and destruction and reproduction. Because of the belief in reincarnation, it makes sense that the god of death is also the god of reproduction. Because remember, life is a cycle. You live, you die, you're reborn until you're able to break the cycle of samsara, achieve moksha, and your soul then unites with God. Humorously enough, in art, he is usually shown accompanied by an erect penis. So, again, here is a large bulbous penis, and here is Shiva doing his thing. And then our last god that is really focused on in India is Vishnu. He is the preserver. He is the god of love, benevolence, and forgiveness. And his primary concern is humanity. Vishnu appears to people on earth in different forms, and supposedly appeared to Manu as the fish who eventually helped save Manu and then ultimately save humanity. When the world ends, the story is written, Vishnu will appear on a white horse. He will bring time to an end, punish the wicked, and reward the virtuous. Now, the Hindu goals of life are very simple. First, we have Kama, which, for anyone who's ever seen or heard of the Kama Sutra, it's about sex and it's about sensual pleasure and enjoyment. But to a larger extent, why would you, as a religion, encourage people to have as much sex as possible? Well, the answer is fairly straightforward. The more sex you have, the more likely the woman will be pregnant, and the more babies she has, the more that will grow up to adulthood and so perpetuate and continue the religion. All of the major religions see sexuality as a vital duty to the religion to perpetrate and propagate and continue the religion. Then we have Artha, which is material prosperity and success. So, having money is a Hindu goal. But the third one is where it gets sticky. Correct action, dharma, in accordance with one's particular duty and scriptural laws. So, if you're going to have sex and if you're going to make a lot of money, you have to do it the right way. You can't be stealing from banks. You can't be cheating on your wife. So, again, the idea here is that you can embrace wealth, you can embrace sensuality, but you have to do it the right way. And then finally, moksha, which is the liberation from the cycle of samsara, which is when your soul, it no longer needs to be reincarnated, but now it's time to unite your soul with God's. In whatever way a Hindu defines the goal of life, there are several methods that wise men have taught for reaching that goal, including yoga, which stresses both the physical and the mental. So here's a picture of a man who's an advanced yogi. He's got his legs behind him and then wrapped around his head. So he literally is facing his butt. And, he's clearly older with the gray beard. And this really shows the kind of dedication that one has to embrace to be able to do these great feats of physical activity. And then while they're in these positions, they go through a mental process called meditation. And this is a very important part of a lot of Hindu practice. Pictorial records of yoga positions have been found by archaeologists that are over 5,000 years old. So clearly, this has been something that's been very um, inherently important to the people of India since the beginning of their civilization. So, one of the common questions that we're often asked are, why are cows sacred to Hindus? Well, sacrificing a milk producing cow has always been taboo in India. Hindus believe that they should honor this gentle animal who gives more than she takes. So she gives milk, she gives cheese, she gives butter. Her dung is often used for fuel. Her urine is used for other things. So, really, without having to um, kill the animal, she gives so much to society. And then, through the influence of Jainism, most Hindus stopped eating beef and most other meats. So, most Hindus are vegetarian, and if they do eat meat, they might eat some chicken or fish. But the vast majority of them completely abstain from all beef. And then we also have the dot on the forehead of people who are Hindu, which is actually called the third eye. It is a symbol of enlightenment. It is referred to as the eye of knowledge in Indian tradition. East Asian and Indian iconographic images show the third eye as a dot, an eye, or a mark on the forehead. So you see, she has a small one, and he has a much larger one. So ultimately, the Hindu aims to attain the realization of one's union with God. So again, when you go through the various levels of reincarnation and you achieve moksha and your soul is released from the burden of life, you join with the energy of God. Hindus also aim to achieve the realization of one's eternal relationship with God, the realization of the unity of all existence, the perfect unselfishness and knowledge of the self, the attainment of perfect mental peace, or as detachment from worldly desires. And again, such realization liberates one from samsara and ends the cycle of rebirth. So let's get back to the history. In the 700s, the Muslims conquered parts of India, but agreed to accommodate the Hindus instead of demanding they convert. And this lasted for 1,000 years. By the 1800s, these Mughals, and this is the name referring to Turkish Muslims, had lost their power, and Hinduism once again became the religion of their leaders. Today, India has the second largest Muslim population, and it's second only to Indonesia. So I had talked about the class system that the Aryans had developed and the Hindus or the Indians had adopted. These are actually it's called Varna. And like I said, the first four are exactly the same. And then over the centuries, the Shudras divided into subsets, and the lowest of the lowest caste became known as outcasts or the untouchables. They are the dregs of society, and their mere touch was seen to pollute a caste. They work in the sewers and clean the streets. They do the dirtiest of the dirty work. And again, they have no hope of rising on the social scale. So the perception is that these people who are outcasts or untouchables are being punished karmically for what they have done in a previous lifetime. Hindus and scholars debate whether the caste system is an integral part of Hinduism sanctioned by the scriptures or an outdated social custom. Although the caste system was abolished after 1947 when India achieved its independence from Great Britain, it is like slavery in the United States. Prejudice still lives on. In the same way that racism exists in the United States, this prejudice against people who work these extremely menial jobs is still very prevalent. So let's look at the Hindu death rituals. And again, Hindus don't believe that when a person dies, that's it. They went to heaven or hell. They believe that this person is going to be reborn somewhere else. So, a person dies, it is common for the family to handle the corpse. They wash and dress the body in a clean white cloth. The body is incinerated on a funeral pyre, and that's what this is over here, or it is cremated in the modern way. On the third, fifth, seventh, or ninth day, relatives gather for a meal of the deceased's favorite foods, and a portion is offered before his photograph. So you'll see there's the photograph and his family sitting around. And again, it's really seen as a memorialization and a realization that this person, best case scenario, has achieved moksha and is now at peace with God, or is being reborn into a family somewhere else. We're going to finish this video slide with a brief discussion of modern women and Hinduism. So, after India became independent in 1947, their constitution declared that men and women are equal. And in many ways, the modern Hindu woman lives a life similar to American women, but only if they come from a high enough caste. And again, here's where you see this 5,000, 4,000-year-old tradition still impacting people's lives. The biggest impact issue facing Hindu women in India today is rape and how rarely it is taken seriously by the courts. A couple years ago, a young girl was raped on a bus, and she was so brutally beaten that she died. And the population was incensed. This happened on a public bus. Why didn't anybody stop it? Why didn't they help? And the 4 young men who were eventually apprehended were all put to death. And it was really a signal to the Indian public, and especially the Indian women, that their rights were going to be more seriously taken as being valid and of concern. So there's a lot of discord and turmoil still today about women in India, but you are seeing some significant strides in the way that women are treated in the criminal justice system. So that'll be it for today. All of this will be on the next quiz, and if you have any questions, please feel free to text or email me. Thank you.